Hello and welcome to the FPL Roundtable. My name is Steven, and this is our inaugural episode. Well, sort of. With me today, I have Casey at FPL Tornado on Twitter, as well as Gabe at FPL Lins. And it looks like the roundtable won't be completely round today, as we are missing our token Canadian Garf. You can find him at FPL Shark. As we all know, they do play soccer in the frozen tundra that is Canada. We got off to an unofficial start last season after game week 34 when we hosted episode 1, Gone Wild, on April 11th. We followed that up with episode 2, Damage Control, a week later ahead of game week 36. But I think we're getting just a bit ahead of ourselves here as we start on our first episode for the 2019-2020 FPL season. So we started out as a U.S. contingent of the Academica Vertex, part of the FPL Academica group headed by Drew and FPL JJ. We did enjoy our potting every other week with the European contingent, but we did find it just a bit difficult to keep a regular schedule due to the time differences. We felt it was just a bit too much. So as the season wore on, we started to do our own thing, potting less under Vertex, and we ended up with the FPL Roundtable. This year, we look to take the pitch and discuss FPL. Now, we're not the only group who looks to do this, but the dynamics with these 3 or 4, if Garf is here, is awesome. We have an excellent group that features a teacher and a doctor, but we will cut the joke short when it comes to Sharknado when Garf isn't available. So today, it'll be more of an introduction of the team with some background on each member. We'll talk a little bit at how we came to play FPL. We'll also toss in some initial thoughts from our analysis and tinkering we've done so far with our FPL teams. And then finally, in order to be successful going forward, it is important to look backwards. So we'll look back on last season and see how we came to have our best seasons in FPL. So let's get started. Let's say hello to both Casey and Gabe. Casey, welcome to the FPL Roundtable.
How's it going, Steven? How's your summer been?
Summer's been awesome. Work has been awesome. And I can't ask for anything better this summer. Kid goes back to school in a week and a half. It's going to be excellent.
There you go.
Gabe, how are things with you in Los Angeles? I know Real Madrid is still not in the Premier League, but we can give you a token club, say Newcastle.
Oh, my God.
I would take Newcastle. But if they would have kept Benitez, we'll get to that adventure later. Things are going well, having a nice summer here. Can't believe that we already have prices and everything, and so much to talk about already. So I'm happy to be back.
Yeah, there is quite a bit to talk about. But before we start talking about this year, let's sort of look back on last year. Casey, let's start with you. You finished, I believe you said, with your highest rank ever. How did that all come about? What went well? What went wrong? And what are you taking from last year, bringing forward with you to improve on where you finished last year?
Yeah, I finished about 11,000 last year. So a little disappointed that I didn't quite creep into the top 10K, which was kind of always the goal. But you can't ever fault yourself for doing your best, and you can't really get too upset for having your best ever season. So I thought it was pretty good. It was my second year. Sorry, guys. I have to get my dogs.
Who let the dogs out here on the FPL Roundtable?
Somewhere else, yeah. Well, it wouldn't be our first podcast, I guess.
No, and you won't get this on every podcast either. So,
oh my God,
everybody should be considered fortunate they're getting this.
So, anyways, yeah, it was my best year. You can't really be too upset by having your best year. And last year was my second year playing FPL. I think I kind of made a lot of minor changes going into last year. Okay. Some minor changes going into last year, namely just being a little more disciplined and focusing on not making rash decisions, not making emotional decisions, and really just kind of sticking to a game plan.
And I'm sorry to interrupt. Discipline is a good word. I think that's actually better than patient, because I know a lot of FPL managers and podcasts I've listened to already, websites I've read, they all talk about patience, but I don't ever think I've heard discipline listed as a key to success or a attribute that you need when you play the fantasy game.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily I don't think it's exactly patience. Patience, although you want patience and you want to be patient with individual players, I think discipline is kind of a broader term when you look at having a big game plan and it's about when you make your transfer. It's about what your process is going into making your transfers. Is about being consistent with yourself and not getting upset over one game week and keeping an eye on the long term. It's not just about taking one player and forgetting about them and being patient. I think there's a little bit more that goes into it, I think.
No, I agree. Gabe, what about you? How was your season, and what year is this, or what year is this that you're actually participating in? How many years have you been playing?
So this will be my 6th year playing FPL, and last year was the first year I really paid attention. 2017, 2018, I started paying attention about halfway through, I think in January or something like that, and climbed towards the end of that season. But yeah, last year was by far my finished at 14K. I bested in points. I got 205 more than I ever have in the past. And I don't know, I'm keeping for ways to take credit for it. And I think I got off to an incredible start. I started Wan-Bissaka. I had Van Aanholt that first game. Like that, I think they got me 23 points combined. So my first game week was 103. So I just kind of, I think, hit on some players preseason because of the extra research I had done, probably because of little luck as well. And but I made some serious mistakes. Like there was I dipped down to right around 100K before bouncing back up to 14K. And I think that's where I really need to take a look, is those weeks where I kept falling. Really started with, and I think Stephen, you mentioned this on Pitch and Pint, that Salah week, right? That week for some reason we transferred out Salah against Bournemouth. I'm like, what the hell? What are we thinking in hindsight, right? So it's just that I'm not a cautious player. I don't think. I do take risks. My season was a roller coaster. I netted, I think I was over the 100 miles last season. But I think what I need to do to mitigate the risk is not, I think sometimes I chase high by sacrificing something good that I already have. Maybe that's a metaphor for what I do as well. I don't know. We won't get into that. But yeah, overall, it was an incredible season. I never learned as much as I did this past season. And I think since we connected kind of midway through the season, so maybe the last third of the season, it really helped me get an understanding of the game, I think, because of the completely different styles both of you have. And
yeah, it was interesting, and I do agree with that last point that once we got together, I can remember Casey and I sitting here. Wait, we got to bring on a new guy to our podcast. He coaches soccer, Casey. What are we going to do? He's going to be like a know-it-all here. Well, you know what? We were very fortunate that we got you. Let me just say that. We weren't sure. You were from LA, so that was okay with me. A West Coast guy, I can deal with that. But, yeah, it beats the Canuck, right? I mean, FPL Shark, come on. Anyway, Garf's not here.
Yeah, let's not pick on him until we can get him face to face. Then we can shit on him. After
maybe it'll get him. Maybe it'll get him to come next time.
Yeah, we're calling you out, Garf.
Yeah, but anyway, getting back to the topic here. But yeah, when we started talking, be it the three of us or with Garf included, and all four of us or any combination of us, it did bring a few other things to the table to mind, and you started looking elsewhere. I mean, never thought I'd be wanting Everton players, but here's Casey making a strong point to bring in an Everton player, and it's like, yeah, I don't know if I can do that, but it was something different than just watching Twitter or listening to other podcasts or even reading, some websites that post articles about different aspects of the fantasy game that we should be paying attention to, be it stats, be it eye test, be it the XG and the XA, if you buy into that. But for me, go ahead, Casey. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that I think there's two things about the podcast in particular, and I think this extends beyond just. I'm not saying that every player out there should just start their own podcast because it's going to make them a better player. In fact, I think a lot of people struggle with it. But I think the two reasons why I think it's really helped me, and I think you guys could probably agree with this, is that it forces you to do two things. It forces you to have an opinion and be able to justify it. So it makes you think about things, and it makes you think about why you're making decisions, and think about, well, what about this player or what about this team or that makes me want this player, and can I give reasons for it? Can I logically back it up? And that's what we have to do every week when we come on a podcast. So it's that self-reflection, which I think anyone can do, but having someone to talk to, whether it's a podcast or if it's a friend or a Slack channel. I know a lot of people, do things like message boards. I think just being able to justify your reasons to yourself and then bounce that off someone else is really helpful. And I think the second thing is you almost are constrained to be patient. And this is where patience is a key. So you make a decision, but then you have to maybe wait and you digest it for a little bit. And then you come on and you talk to other people and then get feedback. So I think that's also helpful. When you hear yourself say something out loud, one, it's, you guys are very intelligent, great players of the game yourself. And so you can give me honest feedback on my ideas, but two, you can just hear yourself say it and you've digested it for a while. And then I think that helps you make better decisions as opposed to maybe some of the worst decisions that you make that might be rash and early in the week.
Would you be willing to do one thing for us this season? Can we call you Dr. FPL?
No, there's a Dr. FPL. There's a Dr. FPL on Twitter, I think, already. So no,
too bad.
No, I'm not Dr. FPL. I don't. No,
Dr. Sharknado. Come on, then.
Dr. Sharknado.
Do you guys? If you guys want insight on tornadoes or anything of that nature, then I'm your guy. But for FPL, I'm just another schmo.
Well, Wan-Bissaka was a tornado to begin the season last year, and as Gabe said, it did help him, and in fact, it helped a lot of us to start the season. I can't remember if I had him on the bench to start the season. I probably did, and probably like a majority of the players, I did not start him for a few weeks just because we weren't sure if this was going to be something that was going to be regular, and lo and behold, he becomes a darling in FPL at 4 million and does very well. And, unfortunately, he's moved to Manchester United now. But aside from that, we'll get into some more FPL talk here in a minute. My season, my best ever, I finished at 31K, which is far and above anything ever close. I mean, my best finish before that, 2015-16 at 75K. More importantly than the points I got or my overall rank was the fact that I finished at 61.3 points per game. And Casey, I know you and I talked about this a lot through the season. Averaging 60 points is more important than I think than anything else in the game, because if you can average 60 points, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be destined for the top 10K. Do you agree?
I mean, historically, that seems to be kind of it's higher. The top 10K average over the years is higher than 60 points. But if you average 60 points, you're probably going to be in the top 50K. And it's once you get up to the 62, 63 points, then you're definitely well within the top 10K most years. Although last year was a very high scoring year. I think I averaged over 63 points per game week, and I didn't quite get into the top 10K. But it's a good benchmark. It also helps you keep perspective of if you have that 40-point game week and you're really feeling down, you're like, I can just make that up in 2 70-point weeks very easily in the next 2 weeks. So don't get too don't get too caught up in one game week.
Yeah, that's very true. And I know most of the weeks I didn't have a lot of big weeks. I didn't have a lot of low weeks. Everything was, relatively the same within about 20 points of each other. Unfortunately, my season came unraveled game week 34 when I wasn't flexible and I stuck with my plan and I used my second wild card and it failed and it cost me the season. I mean, I'm not going to say it cost me the season. I still finished at 31K, which again is my best ever, but I could have been higher. I was up to 11K at one time on the back of, I don't know if it was 6 out of 7 or 7 out of 8 green arrows. Everything was going right, and then, that second wild card came along and it just bit me in the ass and, I couldn't recover. I took a 16-point hit the following week, and I finished 31K. Still very pleased with the season, but again, heading into this year, that 60 points is going to be my key. 60, 61 points is what I'm going to be keying on in order to have a successful season.
Those last 4 weeks were very uncharacteristic play style for you as well. Like what got you to that point at week 34 was very different than how you played the last 4 weeks. And I don't think it was really the wild card itself. I don't think you played a bad wild card. I think there was some bad luck involved, but I think it's how you responded to the wild card and trying to fix problems in over such a short period with hits that you just couldn't make up those points. So I think that might be a lesson that you take from this is that you played a 34 game week season so well. And if you kept that mentality, if you just kept through that, maybe you wouldn't have finished as high as 11K, but you certainly would have been much higher than 31K.
I think, as I said in my Pitch and Pine podcast last weekend, 2 wrongs don't make a right. And that 16-point hit was that second wrong. And, I knew I was buried by then and I would not be able to recover, but hang on. I mean, for lack of a better term. So, still, I'm very pleased with how the season turned out. It was a good season. I enjoyed it. I mean, I had probably the most fun I've had since playing, and this entering this year will be my 7th year. So it was just a lot of fun. I mean, with you guys, with the guys in the beer club, and I mean, it's a camaraderie. It's getting together and shooting the shit with people that you enjoy talking to, and running ideas by other FPL managers and seeing and hearing other strategies. I know we sort of came at the game completely different, the three of us. None of us had Andre Herrera, but that might be okay. But, sorry. I know that's another cheap shot at Garf. He's not here. He can't defend himself. But, I mean, you look at how we achieved what we did, and we all went about it different ways. I mean, there's no one right way to play this game. And, you'll hear people saying now, 5 at the back. Everybody's got to be playing 5 at the back because we have such, good defenders that are going to be 200-point defenders this year that, how can you play a premium forward? Gabe, do you buy into that? Or what do you feel going forward as to setting up your starting 11 here for August 9th when Liverpool take on Norwich?
Ooh.
Gabe? Hello, Gabe. Coming, Gabe.
Sorry, I think I cut out a little bit. I don't think I caught the whole question either. I don't know if my connection's a little wobbly.
I was just asking, we all play the game a little bit differently. I know 5 at the back has been highly popular here as FPL managers have been tinkering with their lineups. Do you buy into that, or are you going to do your own thing when, we look ahead to what Salah has to face with Norwich City here on August 9th to kick off the FPL season?
Yeah, I think it's important to try it all. There was I think it was that I posted on Twitter how I think it's West and the West Ham and Brighton that have good defense, and they rotate really it's Watford, right?
Steven's having a heart attack over here.
We'll talk on Watford here in a minute.
Right, but the synergy there between those two defensively makes it so you could go 3 at the back, and you could go 3 of the absolute best at the back. Then you could go heavy midfield. But I think this is the important time of preseason is that it really allows you to explore the different points of view without and trying them on and seeing how it feels for you. So, you know, I've had 3 at the back. I've had teams with 5 at the back. And to be honest, right now, the 5 at the back doesn't feel. I'm not going to be going 5 at the back. I think probably regardless, I hear from now till then, 4 at the back looks really good to me. I can have some. I don't weaknesses, and then it's a good balance in the team, except for maybe light up front. I think right now nobody's right. You're only right in hindsight, right? So try everything on, and it's all good.
Casey, I know you and I both talked and toyed with 5 at the back last season. Going back 2 years ago, I did start 5 at the back with triple Southampton, believe it or not. It worked for, I think, 2 or 3 weeks. But, you know, one of those keys to success that I always point to, you got to be flexible. I couldn't stick with it, so I finally moved off it. But what are your thoughts about all these defenders who are priced rather nicely when compared to midfielders or some of those forwards that, you know, people are looking at maybe buying a couple of budget forwards, say a Jimenez and a De La Feu, but you're pumping big bucks into your back line?
Yeah. There's a lot of things on defenders that I really like. One is that the value added for spending more money in defense is much more straightforward in the defense than it is anywhere else on the pitch. So putting an extra $1 million or $2 million, well, that's about the maximum you can put in. Putting an extra $1 million or $2 million into a defender is going to get you significantly more points, much easier than putting $1 million or $2 million more into a midfielder. So whether you play 5 at the back or 3 at the back, I think the value of defenders has really come to the forefront. And I think having premium defenders is the way to go, especially at the beginning of the season. I've noticed over the last couple of years that at the early parts of the season, it's a lot more predictable to see what teams will be strong, especially what teams could potentially be defensively strong, than what individual mid-priced player in the attack is going to be a consistent performer. So I think it's just a little bit more of a sure bet to get a $6.5 million Van Dijk than it is to go and get a $6.5 million midfielder. So I think that's why I'm leaning more towards more defenders at the beginning of the year. But I agree that it's not flexible, and it's really difficult to move out of. It's really hard with free transfers to shift money from defense to attackers. You have to downgrade multiple defenders to upgrade one attacker. And that's what's so difficult about it. But if you have your wild card in your back pocket and you're thinking, well, until I wild card, I'm okay with being slightly inflexible, then having 4 or 5 defenders is okay, in my opinion. But I don't think it's something that you want to play the entire year. In fact, I ran a bit of an experiment last year running a 5 at the back team where every single week I had to field 5 at the back. And that team did pretty well at the beginning and the end of the year. In fact, so well that it finished around 50K. But it was, I think I was in the top 5K at Christmas time. And it was that fixture pileup period where it really fell off. And I went down to like 200 or 300K playing 5 at the back through the early parts of January and February, where there's a lot of rotation. And it's hard to move players around, and you're in between wild cards, and there's just not a lot you can do to move money around, and that's where you really drop off. So I think that middle third of the year is really hard to play 5 at the back. But it seemed like for last year, the beginning and the end of the year, it was perfectly viable, and there's good value there.
Yeah, like you said, there's no answers at the beginning of the season, so everybody is right. One of the initial drafts I had a five-man defense. I had 2 from Liverpool. I had Laporte, and I had a Chelsea defender. I can't remember. It was probably Alonso over Luiz, but I did have 5 at the back, but I've moved off it since then. I don't think I'll go back to it. I've started pre-planning one team at each of the formations, because I don't know what I'm going to do right now. The team that I have unofficial FPL may or may not be the one I start with. We'll talk about that here a little bit later because it's somewhat interesting. But okay, let's move off the defense. Let's go forward to the forwards before we hit the midfielders. We've got a few budget-priced forwards. Kane is one of them. Sorry, I got to get them up here. I can't remember. Aubameyang, Aguero, 12 and 11 million. Kane comes in at 11 million. Are we buying the hype on the premium forwards, or are we looking at more of the budget options with your Jimenez, with your Josh King, with your Gerard De La Fey? Can we buy into that? Maybe even Dominic Calvert-Lewin, 6 million, who had a decent year last year, but does need to increase his minutes to become somewhat of a more viable forward. Casey, you have any thoughts?
I think it comes down to captaincy. I really like Kane and Aubameyang at 11 million, and I think they're both at 11 million. So I really like them. I think they save you $1 million over Sterling, and they save you $1 million over Aguero, and they save you $1.5 million on Salah. So if you plan on having them as a captain option for a run of game weeks, I don't see why it's a problem having them. That's kind of the decision you've got to make, though, is who do you want to be your captain options over kind of a window of time. And so I think you should have two. I've thought about just going with one captaincy option and just kind of auto capping someone. If you look back at other seasons, it's just not viable, I don't think. I think rotating your captains is really the way to go. So it's really up to captain. I don't think there's a problem with getting a single premium forward, but it's really whether you want to captain them.
So you've got $9.5 million to start the season. Do you start Lacazette or do you start Vardy?
I'd start. Well, Lacazette's got 2 really good fixtures, and then they're kind of crappy, right? So, correct. and then Vardy's got one okay fixture. Then they have. Let me double check.
They have Wolves at home and Chelsea away. Leicester does.
Okay, and then week 3 they have Sheffield and then Bournemouth, and then it's kind of mixed bag for them for quite a while. That's interesting. So,
and I'm not doing this for my benefit.
If I could,
yeah, go ahead, Gabe.
Some information. So, according to the fantasy fixture tracker, and they're looking at the difference in the FDR, differentiated FDR, and Arsenal for the attacking has a 1 point boost. This is middle of the pack amongst the higher there, but see, Leicester's 1.29, so their expected goals is much less than Arsenal first 4 game weeks.
And Gabe, I'm going to toss that question to you as well, but you know what? I'm sorry you can't draft the Church of Rondon this year, as it looks like he's going to China with Rafa. I know that's going to upset you.
Oh,
but
I'd like to take a moment to announce my retirement from FPL.
And he's done it right here, folks, on FPL Roundtable. Anyway,
that's the sound of a heart breaking.
Isn't it?
When Lisa breaks Ralph Wiggum's heart, that was me.
So where do you fall in the forwards? What are you looking at? Some of the premiums like a Kane or an Aguero? Are you worried about not running with the premium and maybe running with 2, 6'5", 7'5" forwards to start the season?
I think to start the season, I am going to go budget, mostly because of the fixtures. And also, we keep seeing how we get players like Salah, right? And the big lesson we learn in seasons past is, just keep those players. Keep them all season. Like, there's no reason to transfer them out. But then, week 8 comes around and Aubameyang's fixtures start to get really nice from week 16. you have to get rid of one of your more expensive options to bring in somebody like that. So I do have an interest. I have an interest. I'd love to bring in Aubameyang week 8. And I'm not exactly sure how I would do that. I don't want to get rid of Sterling or Salah to do that. But to start, to your question, I'm in on. I really hope he stays. I hope he does not go to Italy. Rumors are, Steven, Milan and Napoli. They have an incredible attacking schedule. The first 4 game weeks, differentiated schedule here. They are second, I believe, with an expected goal of, what is it here? 1.38. Liverpool's at 1.47. Reference there. So I want a piece of that, and I think Deulofeu is the explosive one that can deliver on that as long as he stays on the team. Who else do I have? I have King at the moment, and I'm not very happy with it. So I may move that to Jota because I have Fraser as well. So but it's hard to ignore those fixtures. So is far from settled on that front, but it is going to be a combination of King, Deulofeu, and Jota to begin the season up front. Mostly because
Yeah, I think some of the rumors about Deulofeu moving to Italy are unsubstantiated at this point. I know that was something that was talked about a little bit earlier in the year, or maybe after the season finished. There hasn't been much talk from what I've seen and the contacts I have through Watford and those who live back there and actually go to the games, unlike myself. But it'll be interesting to see. I know they have a huge price tag on them, but still, I think those were just rumors from last month. So I don't really expect Deulofeu to move, which means he'll be up there to start week 1 against Brighton with Troy Deeney. And I'm just having a hard time buying into Deulofeu actually after watching him all last season. He's got the skill, he's got the control, he's got the speed, but just too many times he couldn't finish. I mean, he could have easily doubled his goal output based on the number of shots he had. But I mean, you look at the number of shots, number of attempts he had from inside, 12 yards maybe, and the number of opportunities he missed or couldn't pick out a corner or hit the keeper, and maybe as a supporter, it just is a little bit more frustrating. Casey, I'm sure you've seen it with watching Richarlison, the same thing. I mean, he gets a lot of shots, and I don't know if he was better last year than when he was at Watford, but you take all these shots, but your shooting percentage ends up being like a 15% because you can't hit the target. You got to get the ball on the target, and that's the only knock I have on Deulofeu right now is, I'm not sure I can trust him to, come out with 4 excellent fixtures to start the season and, put the ball in the back of the net. I mean, it's a little frustrating, as a supporter, but, I keep my fingers crossed we can again start 4-0 like we did last year. Casey?
I think that's really fair criticism of Deulofeu. And it's always been like that consistency, right? He does these incredible things, but just grind and do the easy stuff. But he played less minutes and is less expensive. All these players that he scored more points than at the end of weeks, the end of last season. Scored more points than Sterling, Aubameyang, Eriksen, Sigurdsson, Jimenez, and then Watford opened their season against Brighton as they did last season. Pereira got a brace in that game and a 2-0 win. I just see a lot going for them, and if he's going to be the starter there, I think Watford could start actually really strong this year.
All right, let's move off Watford. I'm not into their defense. I don't think it's great.
I don't know. I think Gabe might want to be a Watford fan with you there, Steven.
I got a spare jersey if you want. All right.
We'll see. We'll see.
So let's transition from the forwards now to the midfielder, and we may as well go to Everton since we have Sigurdsson and Richarlison, both Everton midfielders, and both priced at $8 million. Sigurdsson, I feel that's a fair price. Richarlison, being who I am, I think it's $500,000 overpriced. Yes, I know he put up 13 goals last season, which is an improvement over the 5 he had for Watford. So that is a plus. But on the negative side, he did go missing again on the side of a milk carton last year, but still finished with 13 goals. Casey, you have $8 million to spend. You got one midfield position left. Where does it go? Sigurdsson or Richarlison?
Well, at this point in preseason, I have Sigurdsson in my team. He's a known quantity. He is consistent. He's done it for a long time. I think if Everton get a forward line player who's a prolific goal scorer, so they have a third goal scoring option in the team. I think
Dominic Calvert-Lewin isn't proficient.
He's not prolific at goal scorer. Yeah, he is very good at hold up play. He's good at pressing from the front, running the channels, doing a lot of the dirty work. He's great in the air, but his goal scoring is not great.
So answer me this before I don't interrupt you again.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Could Dominic Calvert-Lewin double his output if he gets some minutes this year?
Yeah, I think so. But that's a big if, because I think they're looking for someone who can – I mean, doubling the output for him has gone from 5 goals in a season to 10 goals in a season. And I think with the minutes, he could do that. I just don't know if he'll get the minutes.
Assists would also go up to, 10 or 12, right?
Yeah, he could – if he started every single game this season at the 9, he's probably a 10-goal, 10-assist type striker. And that's good. But Everton want a 15 to 20 goal scorer in the forward line, and that's what they're looking for. So I don't know if he'll get the minutes. He might not. I think he's the perfect striker for Everton when they're playing the top 6 sides, and they want someone to be a nuisance, and they want someone to play on the counter and hold the ball up and be a little isolated and wait for people to come and help in the attack. But when they're on top, they need someone who can really score goals. When they're playing bottom half teams, and they're playing Brighton, and Brighton's got 10 men behind the ball, they need someone better at scoring goals than Calvert-Lewin. So I don't know if he's going to get the game time. But back to the midfield, I think a lot of it's going to be what does Everton do in the summer transfer window. They're looking to bring in a right winger or a striker or both. I think a right winger is probably more likely. And so the real question becomes, where does Richarlison play? Does he get moved back to the left? Does he play striker? He's going to play. Marco Silva loves him. I think he's a good player. He's a developing young player. I think it's easy to forget that he's 21 and he scored, 5 goals in the Premier League at 20, 13 at 21. What will he do when he's 22? I mean, I think his ceiling is very high. He can be a 20 goals a season player. He's got that potential. He needs to find the consistency that comes with maturity, and that's his big issue. So right now there's just some uncertainty on where he's going to play, how that is going to work across the front line, but we know where Sigurdsson's going to play. He's going to play in the 10, and we know he's going to have good options to pass to. We know he's great at shooting from outside the box, kind of a Kevin De Bruyne light in that sense. So there's just less uncertainty with Sigurdsson. So right now in preseason, I'm leaning towards Sigurdsson, but I would be completely unsurprised if by the end of the season we see Richarlison as the higher scoring FPL prospect. But you might want to give it a little time.
That's understandable. So you guys buy a right winger, just saying out of the blue. You get a right winger. Does Bernard play on the left? And does that mean they move Richarlison back into the middle and drop Calvert-Lewin out?
I think it's the flexibility. I think so. Marco Silva wants flexibility. He wants 4 or 5 players for 3 spots up front, and I think he wants to change it around depending on the opposition and the time of the game. I think it's like I said. I think Calvert-Lewin will probably play as a striker versus the top 6 teams and the better teams when they're playing more counterattacking. And I think when they're trying to break teams down, they'd probably want. or they probably want Richarlison in the center and have multiple kind of people in the box that can score goals and can find space and create space for shots and things like that. And Bernard, I think Bernard is, it kind of just depends on what the center forward situation is. It might be that they want Richarlison on the left and Bernard gets dropped to the bench, and then he comes on as a super sub in some games, and then in some games Richarlison's playing through the middle and Bernard's on the left. I think he just wants options, and he wants to be able to give different looks to people, and I think that's really what Marco Silva wants. He wants it to be very hard to game plan against Everton.
All right, one question. One more Everton question for both of you. You've got $6 million. Digne, Coleman, or Pickford?
It's an easy one for me. It's Dean. It's all day. Just set pieces, the threat from set pieces. Game 28 to 38 last season. They actually scored. Dean only got 1 point more than Coleman in those weeks, but significantly more than Sigurdsson, significantly more than Richarlison. They have the second best defensive fixtures. The first four and the second best attacking fixtures. So I kind of want a piece of both of that. Attacking wingbacks is the way to go. And I want I want the wing back that takes set pieces. So I'm all over Dean. Siggy was actually one of the first names in one of my first drafts, but I haven't had him back in there for a while. So Dean.
All right, so Digne for Gabe, and I'm guessing Casey, you have him as well in your starting 11.
Yeah, Luka Dean's probably. It's tough. I know a lot of people are going to say that Andy Robertson's the best left back in the league. It's really close. Andy Robertson plays in the best defense in the league, but purely left back, I would make the argument that Luka Dean is a better left back than Andy Robertson. He is so creative. Dude,
those 14 first games are incredible outside of City in game week 7.
He's just so good. And what I think the issue with Seamus Coleman is he's a great nailed-on player in the back line, but remember what I said about Richarlison, and they want to bring in a right winger. Coleman was a non-option attacking-wise until Richarlison moved over to the right, because when Walcott was playing on the right, there just was no chemistry between him and Coleman was not allowed to overlap because Walcott kept outrunning him and he kept having to stay deep. But when Richarlison plays on the right, he allows Coleman to overlap, and it's really going to be a matter of, do they bring in a right winger? How does that right winger play with Coleman? And it's a big question. So I think right now, assuming that Bernard's going to play on the left pretty often, and Dean's just going to be allowed to maraud forward, I think Dean's a pretty big no-brainer to play on the left.
All right, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
I don't have him in my starting 11, but I think that's a good segue as we wrap things up here in about the last 10 or 12 minutes to look at where each of us are now with our teams. Gabe, do you want to start? What are your thoughts here as we're still, 3.5 weeks ahead of the start of the season?
Okay, I'd be happy to start here. I was having a conversation with somebody, and it reminded me quite a bit of the who got the assist guys, because it seems to be a very strong template building. It's kind of pretty entrenched. Started to stray from that template and throw in just to see what it's like. Like right now I have roster looks like Ederson, Alexander-Arnold, Dean, Robertson, and the template would say Laporte would be in there probably, right? And then pick one more. But I just recently threw Delph, maybe Delph in there. I don't know, experimenting. Type of defender will play out, but I don't know where he'll play yet. But basically, that fourth defender spot for me is kind of wide open. So that's the spot I'm tinkering with. So I have Robertson and Alex Arnold are nailed on for me for the same reason Dean is. They both have the best attacking and defensive fixtures for the first 4 game weeks. I think that's the best way to kind of maximize points at the beginning. My midfield, and then I have 4-0 defender in Simpson, just a bench fodder. My midfield is pretty template. Salah, Sterling. I have Ayoze Perez in there and Fraser. I'm starting to buy it. I think what I've seen in preseason and Brendan Rodgers' comments, I didn't have him in there. I just put it this morning for the long. I've had Saha in there. I don't remember who else I had there, but I'm starting to buy the kind of Ayoze hype. With Brendan Rodgers that they just like flat out just bottom line they need to score more goals, and that Perez is there to do. And I have Don Dunker, 5th midfielder, but I may switch that out if it depends. It's I don't like to have a highly owned inexpensive because once people come off of them, then we can lose value there. But I think he could be a useful, inexpensive player. So and then up front, right now it's Delofeo and King with Greenwood. I don't know. Jota might come in. Delofeo's nailed. If Jota comes in, he'll come in for King. So that's where I'm going now. Things may, if I switch things around, for example, if I switch out Delph and Simpson and do that insane, which I don't think I'm going to do, but I could do that insane back 3 with and then Cathcart and Dunk to fill in the gaps. Hold on while Steve pukes in his mouth, throws up and swallows. I know you don't like that, but I mean I probably won't go with that, but that's something I'm looking at as well. So that's where I'm.
Like I said, it's early. We're still tinkering to some degree with all of our teams. Casey, what's your team looking like here on this 18th of July?
Yeah, I could go through it, but I just want to talk about the template very, very quickly. I think about it as a marathon, and this is the analogy. I know people use marathon analogies all the time, but at the start of the season, you just want to stay with the pack. At the start of the race, you just want to stay with the top people. You just want to do what the best players are. So I wouldn't get too caught up in, is this a Twitter template? I want to be different than the Twitter template. If this is what you think is the best team is, you got to go with it. And you can't worry about being different. You just want to accumulate points. And who cares if the other people on Twitter are also getting those points? It's a small minority of the larger group of FPL players. And I think in general, the people on Twitter are much more involved, and they're going to be better players. So why wouldn't you want to do something that a lot of other good players think is a good idea? So I wouldn't get too worried about this is the Twitter template and I want to be rogue. Well, if you want to do well, you probably want to do what a lot of people that are good players are doing. So, but as far as my team, I'm playing 5 at the back right now. I just can't justify a 6.5 million forward over a 6 million defender. You know, you got 2 million to play with there. Why wouldn't you spend it on a Kyle Walker or a Luka Dean or someone like that, where you're just, they're a known quantity. They're going to get you. If you think about the full season, Luka Dean, for example, let's say he gets 12 let's say he gets, for very conservatively, they get 12 clean sheets this year, and he gets 8 attacking returns. Well, that's 20 returns over 38 game weeks. That's every other week you're getting a return from him on average. That money is, I mean, if you had a 6.5 million forward getting a return every other week, you would be ecstatic. But the problem is that most 6.5 million forwards are 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 return type players. And most 6.5 million midfielders are similar, 1 in 3, 1 in 4 returns. Why wouldn't you want that player that can get you returns much more consistently? So I'm kind of set on 5 at the back at the beginning, unless a merging 6 or 6.5 million forward comes into play. And the reason I'd want that 4-4-2 instead of maybe a 5-4-1 would just be the flexibility of moving players around a little easier. And that's just if I feel like I don't want a wild card anytime in the first 8 game weeks, it would be nice to have that flexibility of team structure. But looking at the long view, I just can't justify taking $2 million out of my defense right now and putting it into a 6 or 6.5 million forward or a 6 million midfielder or something like that. It's tough to do. So right now I've got double City and double Liverpool defense. I've got Salah and I've got Sterling, and that's kind of the core of my team. And I'm just going to tinker around it with the rest of my money and get 4 players that I can kind of play around with. But know that because City and Liverpool have such great fixtures, they're such great teams, those 6 players are going to just accumulate a lot of points for me.
Coming in like an F5 tornado, Casey bringing it with 5 at the back to start the season. I don't disagree. Like I said in the past, I've gone 5 to start the season. It worked well for a period of time, but I knew I had to move off of it. This year, I do have a couple of drafts that do have 5 at the back, but I don't believe I'm going to start that way. I've taken a little bit different of an approach. And I wrote about it last week that I'm starting with 3 Liverpool defenders and Robertson, Alexander-Arnold, and Van Dijk. And then in the midfield, I'm going purely Man City. Right now it's Sterling, De Bruyne, and Bernardo Silva. Sterling could technically bump up to be Aguero up front if I pop somewhere for $500,000. But 3 attackers from City, 3 defenders from Liverpool. I'm not going to mess with the City defense right now. I'm not sure who the sure thing is. I know we all say Laporte. We've seen him in a lot of teams, but I think to be sure we'd have to buy in on Ederson at the back. And right now, I don't want to do that. I think if Heaton moves to Villa, he'll be a viable keeper at 4.5 with the 4 million backup. Up front, Lacazette's currently who I have in there with Calvert-Lewin, 9.5 and 6 million, but. Casey, I know you answered the question earlier, Lacazette or Vardy. I do have an eye on Vardy, but now you make a very strong Gabe makes a strong case for Perez. Maybe that's just because I like how he says his name. I'm not quite sure. But Tielemans is who I have in my starting 11 right now. But I would not be against moving off Tielemans and going with a Perez. Just because we know what he did last year with Rondon at Newcastle. So I'm pretty happy with it right now. Is it risky? Yeah, it's risky. But, as Casey said, to start the season, you want to stay with the pack. And one of the things that I want to do, I want to start strong. I've never started strong, and I want to hold 3 to 4 players all season long. Hopefully they're premium players that I don't move off of. So your Sterlings, your De Bruyne's, Robertson, Van Dijk. I don't want to move off those players. I know sometimes we look at them and, in order to get, a hot premium in like a Kane, we gotta cut our losses somewhere. And, Sterling's a 1-for-1 and that gives me $1 million in the bank. But, I don't want to move off my premium. So I'm going to stick with City midfielder or City attackers right now just because I have a strong suspicion they're going to end up with 100 goals again, 95 2 years ago, 106 last year. Can you go wrong with them right now? I don't think you can. So that's how I'm looking to start the season.
Gabe, what's your thought on premiums?
Premiums in general,
just your strategy. Do you chop and change? Do you keep them for a long period of time? What are you thinking?
See, I think so. Last season, the part of the secret to my success last season was chopping and changing. Like I remember I skyrocketed, and I brought in Sterling before he hit, and everybody was still captaining Salah. Game week, I don't know. I want to say. I don't know, somewhere in the teens. And I captained Sterling, and that was. I think he scored 21 points that week, and so it was kind of like when I would go a little bit differential in the premiums, but that can also be a trap. So I think it's really circumstantial. As far as premiums go, I think I'd agree with the point you made. To start the season, have all your money in kind of like 2 main ones, that rotate captaincy well. I think and this is where I think team value does play a role, because I think as we get towards the end of the year, you can have maybe 3 premiums if you've built up some money well. So I think, yeah, I'd say have 2 that you bank on. I be mindful of fixtures, and never move off of a premium with a good fixture ever. Just another premium with what you think is a fixture, even if it's a double game week. Never move off a premium with a good fixture. That was my big lesson last year.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice.
Casey, any final thoughts?
I kind of stuck with, for the first 3 quarters of the season, I had Mo and then I was between, I actually did Mo, Mane, Sane basically was the core of my midfield for quite a while. I kind of that double up on Liverpool that worked so well for people. So I kind of really had like one super premium, and then I tried to load up on a bunch of kind of the lower end of the premium table players, and it worked pretty well, especially if you're okay with captaining Mo most weeks, which is what I did. And then Aguero, I had Aguero, but last year Aguero was 11. It was a little easier to have him as a second premium because he didn't take up that much of budget. This year I'm kind of considering, just getting Sterling and Mo and just keeping them and just saying, no, I'm not dealing with chopping and changing unless one gets injured. You're just going to stick with them. And unless I see something very different, like Sterling gets dropped 2 weeks in a row for some weird reason. Regular rotation with City is one thing, but if he gets, for whatever reason, dropped multiple weeks in a row like Sane did last year, and he's out of favor, then you can come off. But yeah, I kept Salah. I captained him for his hat trick against Bournemouth. I think that was one of those discipline things. A lot of people were like, oh God, he only got 15 minutes off the bench. It's time to cut losses. And I looked at that and said, wow, he's rested. He's definitely ready for the weekend. He's easy captain choice. He's playing Bournemouth. This is the time to captain Mo Salah. And so those are the sort of things that I'm hoping to do this year, is just not worry about wasting transfers on those good players, because they're good players for a reason. All of them score around 200 points a year. They're gonna get you returns. You gotta stick with them. It's not worth trying to hit one or another in the right fixture. I think that's my thought on it, at least.
Dr. Differential. I like the name of that piece.
Not Dr. Differential. I'm not really big on differentials. I think having most of the good players that are also highly owned is a differential in and of itself, because how many people have 10 players that are template? I mean, they're template because a lot of people have each individual player, but who actually has all of them? I think that's differential enough in itself.
Agreed.
And I think that's a good point. It's just a concept we brought up, I think, last, and we were speaking actually with near Family Tools. Just trying to find out kind of what the intersection team is. So we know what the ownership of an individual player is, but what's the ownership of 2 players combined, 3 players combined? And then you can really have a better sense. And I'm not sure if there's any way to find a way to kind of develop this metric. Then you can really have a sense of how template your team really is, because you're judging the combination of players, not the players in isolation.
Yeah, I think that's a point.
Yeah, we can get figures. We can get those figures. They're available.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have to, I think, maybe start overlaying them one on top of it, I guess. But to your point, Casey, I do agree with like how it's going to be. There's, as the season goes on, right? And you see, for example, last season, remember Aguero just he's getting some returns, but he's playing 60 minutes, and all of a sudden that little bug starts to eat at you. Like, Look, Aubameyang has this insane schedule coming up, right? Like game week 8 to 16, it's Bournemouth, Sheffield, Palace, Leicester, Southampton, Norwich, Brighton, West Ham. So like to resist that temptation and to know if you even should resist that. When you're in the thick of it, when it's week 8, it's hard, right? That's the difficulty.
Yeah, big fixture swings. That's one thing. To make a big long like if you're looking at 8 game weeks and someone has way better 8 game weeks than another, that's fine. If you want to switch premiums for that reason, I think that's acceptable. But I think so often fixtures are a mixed bag, and for a team like City, is really any fixture bad except for maybe Liverpool.
Right.
You gotta just think, okay, so what if Kane has Bournemouth, Brighton, and Sterling has Arsenal, West Ham? Yeah, sure. On paper, those 2 fixtures might be better for Kane, and you have this idea that I'll make a double move to get Kane because I want him for those 2 fixtures, whereas Sterling could very easily hat trick against either of those teams. And all of a sudden, you just move use 2 transfers, maybe even burn 4 to do some move that was maybe a little bit better, but it was mostly sideways. And avoiding those transfers, I think, has been a big part of moving up. So I finished about 40K my first year. I finished 11K last year. And I think just recognizing that those transfers are just not worthwhile most of the time was one of the big reasons why I jumped up. And if I can just be more aware of that and avoid those decisions, maybe in the mid-price bracket even going forward, I think that's going to help me make that next jump. And I think that's what I'd recommend for other people.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Some good information there to end the podcast for today. Again, we are the FPL Roundtable. You can follow us on Twitter at FPL Roundtable. We're working on the official launch on the website. We hopefully will have something here in the next day or 2. But we're looking forward to our participating this year in the FPL. We'll have a lot of information coming forward. But for now, that's going to do it for tonight. With any luck, we'll be back next week to bring you more FPL talk about what's coming up and not necessarily centered around our teams. So for me, that's all I have. Casey?
Yeah, it was great chatting with you guys again. It's been a long 2 months, and I'm looking forward to some more regular conversations.
Good to be back, everybody. Happy tinkering.
God, I can't wait for football.
And that'll do it. Everybody have a good night. We'll talk to you next week.